A word of caution. This episode features descriptions of sexual assault and murder that may be disturbing to listeners. In 1992, a 13-year-old from Hickory, North Carolina went missing from her home and was discovered murdered a few weeks later. Around the same time, 3 older women known to have high-risk lifestyles went missing and were later found deceased. While 2 men were eventually arrested in those 3 deaths, no one was ever charged in the death of Isis Denise Dee Dee Dawkins. Was her death completely unrelated to the others? A cold case unit has reopened Dee Dee's case, and they believe they are closer to finding the truth. We'll also discuss the story of a North Carolina woman arrested for the death of her newborn in California back in 1987, and give an update to the Justin Lee Turner murder case from South Carolina. There is much to love about North and South Carolina, but the 2 states have also had their fair share of violent and senseless crimes over the years. From murders on the Blue Ridge Parkway, in the heart of big cities or sleepy college towns, and along the coastal waters, some of these stories may be new to you. Some may have happened in your town. Some may involve people that are still missing to this day. But all will leave you remembering to always be vigilant about the people you meet and the places you go. I'm Renee Robertson. Please join me for Missing in the Carolinas. Episode 110, 4 1992 deaths in Burke and Catawba counties. A listener recently emailed me an article link about a cold case out of Catawba County. When I started reading about the unsolved murder of 13-year-old Isis Dee Dee Dawkins, I realized there was a connected story about a series of murders and suspicious deaths that took place during the summer of 1992. It resulted in one man residing in a bus at a local junkyard being convicted of murder, and another local man being convicted of 2 murders. However, neither of these men were ever connected to Dee Dee's death. I thought listeners of this podcast might be interested in taking a more comprehensive look at what happened during that summer. First, the deceased body of a black female was found in the early morning hours of June 6, 1992, in a burning trash container on a rural road in Burke County. I won't get into all the details, but the victim's head had been wrapped in duct tape, and she had been tortured and sexually mutilated before dying from asphyxiation due to strangling from a cord placed around her neck. It took investigators several days, but they eventually identified the victim as 29-year-old Mary Belle Adams. They learned she had been known to work as a prostitute and frequented an area near Center Street in Hickory known as The Hill. On July 3rd of the same year, 13-year-old Isis Denise Dee Dee Dawkins, who friends and family simply knew as Dee Dee, disappeared. She loved playing softball, flag football, and basketball. Family affectionately called her a tomboy who always had her hair in a ponytail under a baseball cap. She was last seen by her mother, Barbara Dawkins Doula. On July 28th, a worker installing a sprinkler system near the Brookford Dam just south of Hickory discovered a decomposing body that was later identified to be that of Dee Dee. She was buried under a pile of logs, sticks, and other debris from the dam, and was dressed only in a bra, socks, and 1 athletic sneaker. There were no other items of clothing or identification nearby. The North Carolina medical examiner identified Dee Dee from x-rays, and investigators told the public they were investigating Dee Dee's death as a homicide. Then, on August 15, 1992, the nude body of a black female was found in the basement of a vacant rental property on 1st Avenue Southeast in Hickory. She was later identified as 27-year-old Taneen Conley. Police believe she had died sometime between August 11th and August 15th. A week later, another deceased female, 31-year-old Betty Jean Ramser of Newton, was found in the crawl space of a partially burned home on Highland Avenue Southwest in Hickory. She was also not wearing clothes when she was found. Police first zeroed in on a suspect for Adams's murder, a man named Eddie Lloyd Howell, and then a few months later, they arrested a man named Glenn Edward Chapman in the death of Betty Jean Ramser. First, we'll talk about the 30-year-old Howell, the suspect in the brutal murder of Mary Belle Adams. Howell lived in a bus on the grounds of a local scrapyard and was known to have solicited prostitutes in the Center Street area. He was also the father of a 4-year-old daughter who lived with her mother. Eyewitnesses from the Center Street area had seen Hal's blue pickup truck in the area before Adams went missing. A warrant was issued for his arrest, but he quickly fled the state. Within a month, investigators received a tip that he was in Needles, California, and would be picking up some money at a Western Union office there. When police in California attempted to stop the cab he was riding in, Hal pointed a gun at the cab driver's head and forced him to keep driving. The cab driver, fearing for his life, managed to stop the cab and flee from the scene. When Hal tried to fire his gun at the officers, it jammed. He was arrested and extradited back to Burke County. The owner of Ralph's Used Cars and Parts gave local authorities permission to search the school bus where Hal had been living at the time of the murder. A blood sample taken from a beanbag and sofa from the bus Hal was residing in matched the DNA of Adams. It was the first time prosecutors would be able to use DNA evidence in a trial in Burke County. Also during the trial, Janet Marie Farab, another local sex worker, told the jury that Hal had picked her up the same day Adams was murdered. He took Farab to the school bus, forced her to read from a pornographic novel, and then had sex with her. He requested she perform another sex act with him, and she refused. He tied up her hands and feet with wire and forced the act on her anyway. When she asked him for the payment they had agreed upon, he refused. Instead, he gave her $20 cash. And again, I don't want to get too graphic, but he violated her body once again when he gave her the cash. When he drove her back to Hickory, he threatened that he would kill her if she told anyone what happened. She was fearful for her life and tried to warn some of the other local prostitutes not to go with the crazy white man driving the light blue truck. Unfortunately, that was the same evening that Adams disappeared and was later found murdered. Hal's defense attorneys said he had a history of mental and emotional problems and an IQ of 83. They said he had a difficult childhood because of a hearing and vision problem. He had run away from home at age 13 and began experimenting with drugs. He had spent time in a mental hospital in Colorado that had kept him heavily sedated. One of his attorneys said, "Eddie Hal has done well. He has been somebody. He hasn't been on the public's dole. He supported himself. His life has worth. His life has meaning. In all other aspects of his life, he'd done remarkably well." District Attorney Sean McGinnis urged the jury to think about what Adams went through the night she was murdered. He said, "On that night, Mary Belle Adams suffered a long time. No one deserved to die like Mary Belle Adams died that night." A jury found Eddie Lloyd Hal guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death on September 28, 1994. Before he left the courtroom, he told the jury that he was innocent in the killing of Mary Belle Adams. He took his own life while on death row on May 22, 1996. On December 29, 1992, 25-year-old house painter Glenn Chapman was arrested for the murder of Betty Jean Ramser, whose cause of death was determined to be head trauma. Not long after, police received tips that the man may have also been involved in the death of Tanine Conley. Chapman at first denied knowing the two women, but once police ran tests and found that his semen matched semen found on Conley's body, he changed his story. He then said he was addicted to smoking crack and he had done so with both of the victims. He said he also had consensual sex with Conley. Despite the fear of many black women in the Burke and Catawba County communities, each of the victims except Ramser was black, 1993 did bring some positive news to the area. In 1991, filmmakers had descended upon the area in the summer and fall to film scenes for The Last of the Mohicans, based on the novel by James Fenimore Cooper. At the time, the movie was the largest production to film in North Carolina, and a lot of it was filmed in Burke County. Local residents served as extras for the French and British soldier roles and battle scenes. Area builders and contractors helped build sets and props used in the movie. One scene was shot on the Burke County side of Lake James, in a large wooden fort that had been constructed. Other scenes were shot at Table Rock and Linville Falls, along with Chimney Rock. In 1993, the movie was finally released to theaters nationwide. But the specter of murder loomed over the community despite this news. Chapman's trial began on October 21, 1994. The prosecutor argued that Chapman had been the last person seen with Conley before her body was found. Much of the evidence pointing to Chapman committing the two murders was circumstantial. A homeless man who slept at the house where Ramser was discovered the night before said he saw a black man and a white woman at the house around the time the sun came up. 2 different witnesses testified that Chapman had confessed to the murders. A jury found him guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, and on November 16, 1994, he was sentenced to death. After several post-conviction hearings, a Superior Court judge granted Chapman a new trial, citing that the state of North Carolina had withheld exculpatory evidence and his defense attorneys had been ineffective. One of his attorneys had already been disciplined by the State Bar Association for incompetence prior to Chapman's trial, and the other was an admitted alcoholic. The witnesses who had testified that Chapman had confessed to murdering Conley and Ramser later recanted their statements, saying they had felt pressured by the detectives and prosecutors interrogating them. Forensic testing also revealed that Conley might not have been murdered, but could have died of a cocaine overdose. Detectives also failed to question an inmate in the local jail who was overheard admitting to murdering Ramser. They did not report statements from witnesses who said Conley was seen alive days after police said she had been murdered and left in the abandoned house. The district attorney dismissed all charges against Chapman, and he was released from prison on April 2, 2008. He later filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in 2010, seeking compensation for his time behind bars. The lawsuit was settled in 2012 for a little over $1 million. He has since written 2 books, Life After Death Row and Within the Walls, and now speaks all over the country about flaws within our justice system and his exoneration. As of 2016, he was still awaiting the compensation he was awarded because he had not received an official pardon from the North Carolina governor. You may have some of the same questions I do. Could Eddie Howell have been responsible for the murder of Betty Jean Ramser and Tanine Conley as well? Conley's death was ruled as undetermined, but if she died accidentally, why would her body have been discovered without clothing? Were there really 2 or more different murderers in the Newton-Hickory area during the summer of 1992? And what about Dee Dee Dawkins? She did not fit the profile of the other 3 victims, and few details about her disappearance and murder have been released. I suspect that's because the case is still open. WSOC-TV recently reported that the police in Catawba County have reopened Dee Dee Dawkins' cold case. Her family is offering a reward for information leading to a conviction in the murder. Brookford Police Department Willie Armstrong told local reporter Dave Faraday that members of the department have been re-interviewing anyone they believe may be connected to the homicide. Family members have set up an email for tips, justiceforddd@gmail.com, along with the phone number 828-383-4063. Before we continue, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. I'm a huge fan of the skincare products by SkinxErin. You've heard me talk about them before. I use their pre-cleanse oil, hydrating beauty oil, and perfecting night oil each day, and I swear my skin looks at least 10 years younger. I love that these products don't leave my skin feeling greasy and are loaded with squalene oil and vitamins E and A. Plus, they are extremely affordable, their customer service can't be beat, and the positive affirmations they include in the packaging are so uplifting. Go ahead and treat yourself with 10% off your order using my code MissingCarolinas10. I'll include a link in the show notes for you. Are you looking to level up your writing or learn a new skill? Whether you focus on nonfiction or are more inclined to creative writing, or want to learn how to put together a digital portfolio of your writing, Wow Women on Writing can help. Interested in podcasting? Check out a digital course I created called You Can Start a Podcast. During this pre-recorded webinar, you will learn the benefits of creating your own podcast, materials you need to get started, how to develop content that will keep listeners coming back for more, and ways your podcast can create supplemental income. I'll share examples of different types of podcasts, how to decide on a format, ways to handle the technology necessary for creating a podcast, how to develop your first few episodes, promotion and monetization ideas, and ways you can repurpose your podcast content. I'll provide all the written materials and resources you need, and also give you a handout with information discussed in the webinar, along with suggestions for a few different types of podcasts to explore. Best of all, this webinar only costs $30. You can find it by going to wow-womenonwriting.com and clicking on the Classroom tab. I'll post a link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show. In January of this year, in episode 82, I discussed the case of Justin Lee Turner, a 5-year-old boy who went missing from Moncks Corner, South Carolina on March 3, 1989. His stepmother said he had gotten on the bus for school that Friday morning but never returned home. During a search that included more than 100 people, including local law enforcement officials, Justin's father Victor found the boy deceased in a camper on the family property. The autopsy showed the little boy had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a strap such as a belt or dog leash in the early morning hours before his stepmother said he got on the bus. Justin's school had noted him absent on the day he was allegedly there. Police suspected Justin's stepmother and father knew more information than they were telling, and they took polygraph tests to try and prove their innocence. Those tests turned out to be inconclusive. The couple soon stopped answering questions. Pamela Turner began going by the first name Megan. Earlier this year, the Berkeley County Sheriff's Office arrested Victor and Megan Turner and charged them with Justin's death. Sheriff Dwayne Lewis said a cold case unit had reopened the files on Justin's murder and examined DNA and forensic evidence they said pointed to the boy's stepmother and father murdering him and hiding his body in the camper later on. Megan Turner had also told a few different people over the years that she had an altercation with the young boy before he was last seen. In June, the Associated Press reported that the murder charges against Victor and Megan Turner were dropped. South Carolina Circuit Judge Roger Young ruled that the original detective in the case changed his interpretations of the evidence, and with more than 20 witnesses either dead or unable to testify in a trial, the couple would not be able to put up a fair defense and questioned witnesses who claimed they made incriminating statements about Justin's death. The judge also barred prosecutors from ever charging the couple again. Berkeley County Sheriff Dwayne Lewis said in a comment, "This is not the outcome we were seeking. However, we understand the technicality of prosecuting cases from crimes that occurred years ago." Victor and Megan Turner, who are now 69 and 63 respectively, maintain their innocence. A Shelby, North Carolina woman was recently arrested for the death of her newborn in California in 1987. On October 13th of that year, a man searching recyclables in a dumpster in Riverside, California, found the deceased body of a female newborn baby. The baby's death was ruled a homicide, but the case quickly went cold. The Riverside Regional Cold Case Team reopened the case in 2020 as detectives re-examined DNA samples found at the original crime scene. They worked alongside the nonprofit Season of Justice to identify 55-year-old Melissa Jean Allen Avila as the infant's mother. Season of Justice helps provide financial aid for investigative agencies and families to solve cold cases using DNA analysis and genetic genealogy. Avila, who would have been 19 years old at the time of the baby's death, was arrested in Shelby on August 5th and extradited back to California, where her bail was set at a little over $1 million. In 2001, California passed a law establishing the Safe Arms for Newborns program. This program allows a parent or legal guardian to confidentially surrender a newborn at any hospital emergency room or fire station without fear of prosecution. The baby must be 3 days old or younger and cannot be abused or neglected. To find the nearest safe surrender site, call 1-877-222-9723 or visit the Department of Social Services website. This brings us to the conclusion of this episode of Missing in the Carolinas. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and give it a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, so please like our pages and get started on a discussion of the missing people profiled on the show. Like what you hear? You can buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com, Renee Robertson. I'm planning a series of episodes related to cyber crimes this fall and would love to hear from our listeners in the Carolinas. Do you have a story that features an online scam, a crime stemming from a dating app, or perhaps a catfishing story where someone used a fake identity to make you believe you had a friendship or romantic relationship? If so, I'm interested in hearing your story and possibly interviewing you for the podcast. You can email me at missinginthecarolinas@gmail.com with any details you can share. Don't forget to check out our sponsor, Wow Women on Writing, and the great programs and writing contests they have to support writers at wow-womenonwriting.com. Treat yourself to a skincare kit from SkinxErin with my code MissingCarolinas10. Cover art for this podcast was designed by Macintosh Multimedia. Sound editing is provided by Daniel Robertson. Thanks so much for listening.